Sophomores, happy Friday. Welcome to your final lesson of distance learning before summer vacation. It's been a pleasure and honor being your distance learning teacher for these 10 weeks. But we have one final lesson to get through and then we can celebrate at the end. So let's get started on week 10, lesson 48. Okay, our final joke of the day. I think this one is pretty funny and a good final joke to end on. What do horses say when they fall? Anyone? Help, I can't giddy up. Oh, I cracked myself up. And if you're someone who has enjoyed my jokes as much as I've enjoyed them, I can't pretend like I came up with them myself. I did not. But if you go to this website that's listed here, if you want to pause the video and write the link down, you can see all the jokes that I told and find some more. So I would definitely copy this link down if you're interested. So we are on day 5 of the final week of lessons, week 10. The video you should be watching right now is ELA G10 W10 L48. Again, we're going to be reflecting on the unit text, and today you're going to write a letter to your 10-year future self. And when you get down to lesson 48, as you've been doing for the past 10 weeks, make sure you read the material section to remind yourself of all the materials you need for today. The learning target for lesson 48, the final lesson, is I can reflect on personal challenges and value systems in writing to write a letter to my 10-year future self. I'm not sure if anyone has done this before where you've written a letter to your future self, but if you haven't, this is a great activity, and I think you'll find it really, really fascinating to close out this distance learning that we did together. You're not only going to have to reflect on your value systems and your personal challenges, but also on the readings you've done throughout the past 10 weeks. So I think it'll be a nice sort of conclusion activity before you all start your summer break. Let's quickly discuss the read, think, talk, write protocol for today. For the read section, you're going to reread your notes from week 8 specifically. And in the story, A Dose of What the Doctor Never Orders, the main character receives important advice and follows it. Think about the types of advice you would have given other characters in the text you've read this unit. So go back to your notes for week 8, reread the parts of your notes where it discussed like the main character receiving important advice, and then think about the types of advice you would have given other characters in the text you've read this unit. For the think section, before you begin writing this variation of a time capsule, the letter to your future self, think about the following question. What's the best piece of advice you have ever received? Why was this advice so valuable? Do you still follow it to this day? So you really got to think about the advice that you've been given. You can use the advice that the main characters received or that you would give the main characters from the text that we've read throughout the distance learning. Or you can just think about advice you've received that's disconnected to the text we've read. And why was this advice so valuable? What made it so great and the best piece of advice you have received? And do you still follow it to this day? For the talk section, you're going to talk with someone about the following questions. In A Time Capsule Long Forgotten at the Space Needle is Found article, the author notes that the capsule was forgotten. How can you ensure your letter time capsules don't meet the same fate? What steps can you take to ensure each time capsule reaches its intended audience? So even though they forgot about the time capsule in the text you read this week about the Space Needle time capsule, that doesn't necessarily need to be true about this letter you're going to write to your 10-year future self or really any time capsule you create. How can you ensure this letter time capsule won't meet that same fate, that it doesn't get lost? And what steps can you take to ensure that the time capsule reaches its intended audience so that it actually is found when you want it to be found? And if you're the intended audience, then you just have to remind yourself. But if you want other people to read it, how are you going to make sure that they actually see it and it doesn't get lost like it almost did with the Space Needle? For the writing section, on the note catcher, you're going to write a letter to your 10-year future self. And it's open-ended. You can really take any approach you want when writing this, but some consideration points for writing this letter are, what do you want to be in 10 years from now? What are the goals and dreams you want realized by them? And what is your desired status in different areas of your life? Education, career, wealth, family, friends, love, health, and spirituality. So what do you want to be in 10 years from now, professionally speaking, personally speaking? What are the goals and dreams you want to be realized or achieved by them? And what is your desired status in different areas of your life? And it gives out different areas to think about. As always, when you get to the note catcher, you'll see that there's a giant space for you to write down your answer. As always, for today's closing, you're going to share your writing with someone, and then you're going to read a book for at least 20 minutes and document your reading on the reading log. So the model today will be around the read section, only because the rest of the lesson plan requires that you start preparing, brainstorming, and writing your letter to your future self. I feel like I've given you some ideas for what could go in your letter when I, in previous lessons went over what I would put in my time capsule. I also feel like the letter is very personal to you, and so engaging in a model with more examples from my personal life wouldn't necessarily be super helpful to you. But what I do feel like will be helpful is the read section today, and let's go over what exactly is in the read section before we get started with the model. So if you go back to your notes from week 8, you'll see that the text that we read that week was called A Dose of What the Doctor Never Orders. And you remember that the main character in our text receives important advice and follows the advice. So you're going to think about the types of advice you would have given other characters in the text you've read this unit. So you're going to not only go back to week 8 and remind yourself what happened in A Dose of What the Doctor Never Orders and read about the advice that the main character received and followed. You're then going to go back to all the other texts that are applicable, and you're going to think about advice you would give the main character from those texts. And that will help you in thinking about how do you want to prepare your letter to your future self, because the advice you may give one of these characters may be advice you may also want to give yourself too. Okay, as previously mentioned, the model for today is specifically around the read section and what advice I would personally give to the main characters of some of the texts that we've read throughout the distance learning 10-week period. And I'm only going to model for you 3 of the texts you can choose from, because I just want to give you sort of like a head start and give you a model around my thinking, but I don't want to do them all for you. So the 3 texts that I'm going to model for you today are Civil Peace, Money, and The Thrill of the Chase. And in a little bit, I'll show you a screen that you can pause the video for, and it gives you the rest of the text and the page numbers that you can go back to and look at. So the first text is Civil Peace. The text can be found on pages 38 to 43 of your distance learning packet. And just a quick reminder of what happened in the story. We have a main character, Jonathan Owigbue, and he is someone who, with his family, he escaped the Civil War. And after the Civil War, he basically is trying to rebuild his life and make money and provide for his family. And he's someone who's really motivated by God and spirituality. So the advice I would give the main character is this. I would tell the main character, Jonathan Owigbue, to trust his gut, but to not leave things up to fate. He was a very careful man and took necessary precautions when he needed to, but sometimes his blind allegiance to the mantra, nothing puzzles God, got him in trouble. So I would tell Jonathan not to give up his faith. That's important. It's important to have spirituality, especially in times of strife and challenge, like trying to rebuild from a civil war. So I would not tell him to, not follow his mantra anymore, but nothing puzzles God, or like everything happens for a reason. But I would tell him to not leave things up to fate as often as he did. He trusted his gut, but he really just believed that because nothing puzzles God, everything that happens for a reason, and he didn't necessarily need to be extra careful, extra precautious. He did take necessary precautions, but sometimes he sort of didn't really think about all the different layers of situations, because he knew at the end of the day, or he felt at the end of the day, that God would be watching over him, and that everything happens for a reason, and you can't control fate type thing. Whereas I think some of the situations he got himself into, or that happened to him, could have been avoided if he didn't blindly follow this allegiance or this mantra as much. So I'd give him that advice. For Money, pages 80 to 81, that was the text where we basically learned about this family. And we learned about the parents who often interact with door-to-door salespeople who come to their front door, and the parents never gave the salespeople, the door salespeople, money ever, or bought the goods or services they were selling. No matter how great the goods or services were or what they needed, they never bought them from the door sales people. But they did spend money on their family and their family's well-being, but and also in church they donated money, but they would never spend money and give money to the door-to-door salespeople. And we see how the children are observing these interactions, and it's clear by the end of the text that the children are probably going to carry on the same method of spending and saving and being a little like frugal and not giving money to door-to-door salespeople or other people that need it like their parents were. So my advice to the main character would be, and the main character to me were the parents in the story. The parents in the story believed in being fiscally responsible, which is a good quality in life, but they were focused too much on themselves. Of course, it's important to financially provide for your family, but it's also important to use your privileges in life to help those less fortunate. The parents refused to ever support the door-to-door salespeople, which the children were very observant of. Karma may come around and haunt them later on in life. So I don't knock them or discredit them for being fiscally responsible and for putting their family first. That's how I think everyone should operate in life. But I also think we have an obligation as humans, if we've achieved some level of success and have some privilege, to support and uplift other people who don't have that same level of privilege or success. And the fact that it almost seemed like a fast and firm rule that the parents would never support door-to-door salespeople was problematic to me, and it sent a bad message. And it was leading by a bad example for the kids, because, like I said earlier, the text alluded to the kids are going to grow up and probably carry on the same tradition, spending habits, and not, providing money or buying the goods and services from door salespeople. And that is not like a good legacy to carry on. Like we want to build children and build a future who is giving and cares about others. Of course, still cares about themselves and their family, but also supports their fellow humans that need the support. And I mentioned karma too, because I feel like I do believe in karma. And personally speaking, like even if they don't experience negative karma right away, I think it could come back and haunt them because they were so stingy with their resources and their money. The last one's The Thrill of the Chase, and if you remember, this is man Forrest Fenn, who thought he was going to die, so he wanted to pass on his legacy of his artwork that he collected, and he also wanted to pass on this legacy of adventure and exploration. So he set up this whole treasure hunt where people from across the country come to a specific area and search for this treasure. It's a very elaborate scheme. He put a lot of thought and time into hiding it, and there's clues and stuff. The man never ended up dying. His sickness sort of went away, or they were able to treat it, so he's still living. But he's able to actually now see people try to get this treasure and see his vision play out in real life because he's living still. So my advice to the main character, Forrest Fenn, would be this. Forrest Fenn was a remarkable person for designing the treasure hunt experience, but I would advise him to think of ways to encourage exploration and adventure for those that are not able-bodied or privileged. People with a physical or mental disability could not engage in this treasure hunt. Same with people who didn't have the financial means to just drop everything they were doing and track down the treasure. These people need adventure too. So I would encourage Fenn to think about ways that he can create alternative experiences for them. It's not just his responsibility, of course, but he already has the platform and support to do it. So Forrest Fenn was trying to do this very quickly because he thought he was dying. So I don't blame him at all or knock him for this. But the treasure hunt experience that he created is great for so many people. Like we heard or we read about all of these letters that were sent to Forrest Fenn about how it helped people become closer to people they went on the treasure hunt with, how it helped them explore the outdoors and get off the couch. So for those people, this treasure hunt was incredibly impactful. But those people have some level of privilege because they're able to just drop whatever they're doing or their work and just go and hunt for a treasure and travel there and stuff if they don't live locally. And they are all able-bodied to some degree because you have to be able-bodied, at least physically able-bodied, to be able to go out and run off and try to dig for treasure. So if he was able to make modifications or recreate this since he's living now, if he could, I would give him advice to consider how he could carry over this idea of getting people to explore the outdoors or learn about the outdoors without preventing certain people from being a part of it or accessing it. So of course it would look different because you can't just do the same thing for non-able-bodied people. There would have to be some sort of modification made, but you could still create an experience that would achieve the same end result. You're getting people to connect with other people that they care about, and you're getting people to appreciate the outdoors and try to like experience some adventure. So I would encourage him to think about how he can make this experience more inclusive so he could reach more people. Okay, so there are 6 other texts for you to go back to from the 10 weeks of distance learning. And in a second, I'm going to show you the 6 texts. So I encourage you to just pause the video when I show you the graphic, and you can just remind yourself of what those texts are. Those 6 texts plus the 3 that I just went over make 9, and there's 10 total. The 10th text that's not included here is a dose of what the doctor never orders, only because everyone has to go back to that text anyway, as required in the reading section of today's lesson. So it's not included on this list. So pause the video now if you want to write this down or take a picture of this graphic that I created, because it'll remind you not only what the text are and the page numbers, but it will also tell you the name of the main character that you need to give advice to. So I tricked you a bit. There is one more thing I'm going to model for you today, and that is around the think section. And what you have to do is, before you begin writing your letter to your future self, you have to think about the following questions. What's the best piece of advice you ever received? Why was this advice so valuable? Do you still follow it to this day? So I wanted to model my answers to these questions just because I feel like this will help you the most in preparing for your own letter, just to hear like someone else's approach to these questions. I also have modeled for you a lot of like what are the physical things I'd put in a time capsule, or if like I was writing a letter about it, like what physical things would I reference. I haven't really talked about something that like wasn't physical, that was given to me, like advice has been given to me, but isn't something I could like put in my pocket. It was more something that like I put in my brain. So I wanted to just model for that for you, because I haven't done that kind of modeling at all in any of the lessons this week. So the best piece of advice I ever received, my answer is, if someone is negative or is spreading hate, it's because they are working through their own set of issues or insecurities. People bring others down to make themselves feel better. I'll explain more about that when I get to the next question, but basically the best piece of advice I received was, don't take it personally. If someone is hateful towards you or bullies you or brings you down, it's because they are working through their own issues. They have their own set of insecurities, and they're really just trying to make themselves feel better. And they think the only way to do that is to bring others down. Why was this advice so valuable? This advice has helped me to not take things personally if I ever feel like someone is malicious towards me. If I know at the end of the day that I'm a good person and I'm striving to do the right thing, then that's all that matters. Also, this advice has helped me to not jump to conclusions with people, and has encouraged me to think more critically about what may have happened in someone's life that is causing them to act in a certain way. It has provided me with more overall empathy and self-awareness. So a few things here. This advice is so valuable because it really taught me to not take things personally, not to internalize the hate that people are pushing on me. If they're making fun of me or bullying me, like, don't think it's because I'm less than, or it's because I am not capable or I'm a bad person. I need to just realize that it's actually more about them, the person that's spreading the hate, than it is about me. And I need to just remind myself that I'm a good person. If I know that I am deep down, that's all that matters. But also this advice helped me not to jump to conclusions, because while I would never say that bullying is acceptable and that like we should take pity on the bullies, realizing that the reason why people bully or the reason why people spread hate is because they're working through their own issues has helped me to build empathy. It's helped me to like really think critically about what has potentially happened in someone's life that is making them act a certain way or say certain things. And so I think it really has helped me to gain perspective and to really question and get at the root of why a person is doing what they're doing before jumping to conclusions. Because just because someone bullies someone when they're younger doesn't mean they can't change and do better. It doesn't mean that you can't be friends with that person later. I'm actually friends with someone who used to like bully me, not severely, but bully me back in middle school, because like he apologized, he realized he was wrong. I realized that he was going through stuff, and that was his way of projecting and a defense mechanism. And so I don't think it's ever appropriate just to like not believe that people can change and learn. Of course, you want to distance yourself from people that are spreading hate and bullying you. And I'm not suggesting you should just be their best friend, but I am saying that it can be powerful for you to have this mindset, because you can think more critically about why they do what they do and potentially help them. Or if you don't feel comfortable helping them, connect them to someone that can help them. And the last question, do I follow this advice to this day? Absolutely. It doesn't mean that I don't have my setbacks and sometimes forget to listen to this advice right away. But if I ever find myself in a funk, I remind myself of this lesson and then pick myself back up again to move forward. Being an educator has also forced me to follow this advice because I would not be a good teacher to my students if I did not constantly think about the experiences they have had in life and how these experiences may impact the choices they make. So I absolutely follow this advice to this day because I really find myself using it when I'm in a funk and want to pick myself up out of the funk. I don't let people's words or actions impact me as much as I used to. They still hurt sometimes. I'm not perfect, and sometimes I do let them impact me, but I do try to distance myself and pull myself out of the funk by holding on to this idea that their hate and their bullying is actually has nothing to do with me. It's more about them. Also, I follow it because it's important to follow this advice as an educator, because to be an effective educator to your students, you have to have empathy. And even a student who is a terror in the class, they make all the wrong decisions, they are sort of disrupting the learning environment. It would be easy for me as a human, as a teacher, even to just judge them and push them aside and either just be punitive and try to get them in trouble or just write them off, right? But if I'm trying to think about what's at the root of their negative behavior, which is negative in the sense of trying to have a productive learning environment, but really it's just a cry for help. That's what I need to remind myself, that if students are misbehaving or acting out, it's probably just because they're dealing with their own stuff in their life. And I don't know if I'd actually have that approach to conflict or to quote unquote bad students if I didn't have this advice given to me, that it's important to always realize that if someone is trying to bring others down or disrupt something, it's probably because of something happening in their own life. So I really felt like it's helped me become a better teacher and just overall more empathetic human. And this advice clearly is some of the best advice, if not the best advice I've ever received. So hopefully that was helpful to you in thinking about how you can get started in writing your own letter to your future self. Again, please go back to the lesson plan and read everything. Make sure you understand everything that has to happen for this lesson so you don't finish your last lesson and actually not complete all the components of the lesson plan. So for your upcoming learning, just kidding, there's no future learning. This is the last lesson before summer vacation. It has been a pleasure spending time with you for the past 10 weeks. Even though I didn't get to meet you in person, I'm hoping that I can meet you in person one day, and I'm hoping that you feel connected to me, because I feel connected to you even if I haven't seen you on camera or in person before. Just know that I'm someone who is always here to support you, and I care about you. I have this picture of summer here in the sand because typically over the summer we think about warm weather, being outside. I do think that's going to happen this summer, and I know that we're going to be able to have some level of normalcy, but I just wanted to also encourage people and remind people to be safe when you're outside, take proper precautions, wear a mask, even though the virus is declining now and we're seeing less and less cases pop up in Detroit. Just know that it can pop up again if people are not careful with social distancing or taking proper precautions. So please, 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 if you're going to have a typical summer break where you're outside having fun, exercising with people, just practice social distancing and take all the proper precautions. Just a few last minute reminders. Number one, don't forget to talk about your lesson with someone, especially today's lesson, because the letter to your future self is something that's going to be fascinating that I'm sure your family and friends will want to read and hear about. Number two, read 20 minutes to complete a reading log entry. The reading log is at the front of your packet. And number three, practice reading fluency using the first or second page of your weekly reading. And if you need a reminder of what to do for reading fluency, go to the front of your packet. It's also listed there by the reading log. As always, email your teacher for support for today's lesson. Again, thank you so much for spending 10 weeks with me. I hope you all have an amazing summer. I hope you have some fun. You rest up. You're ready to come back to school in the fall. And as always, not just be safe, but keep learning.